Dr. Burkard, thank you for finding the time to talk with me and congratulations on your new job.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is a question I ask entirely too often, but it seems to be a good one. Joe Simone used to say, if you've seen one cancer center, you've seen one cancer center. What's your new cancer center job? What is Iowa?
Well, Iowa, what I have discovered is very integrated in terms of the research and clinical services, which is wonderful because we can fully align that. The timing of joining the University of Iowa is also outstanding because our VPMA, our dean, has made it a mission to expand the cancer clinical services to serve the entire state. And this is a time where, as you know, the field of oncology is becoming more complex as we're making progress on the war on cancer. Uh, and we are breaking every type of cancer down to many different types, and the guidelines for any given cancer from the NCCN are over 250 pages.
Wow.
So it really requires a deep expertise in every type of cancer. Uh, so as the health system expands, it is aligning very well with our catchment, which is the state of Iowa.
So your catchment has
Um,
always been the state of Iowa.
It has always been the state of Iowa, but what is new is we have a new agreement with Mission Cancer and Blood that was just announced. It is set to close December 31st, if all goes well. And Mission Cancer and Blood is a patient-centered practice with over 24 medical oncologists headquartered in Des Moines. They're very active in clinical research, and they have 20 outreach sites. So the future of oncology in Iowa is focused on reaching patients in their own community. And so a patient in, say, Atlantic, Iowa, 3 hours from Iowa City can see an expert in their community and have the full expertise of the Holden Comprehensive Cancer Center backing up that oncologist.
And that's in terms of the numbers of patients, what does that do? Like numbers you see versus the numbers you will see.
I think it will approximately double the number of patients who are in our health system for medical oncology. It is not our vision or goal to take over every oncology practice in the state. There are many excellent oncologists in rural communities, often centered near critical access hospitals, and it is our goal to collaborate with them as well. But this alignment with Mission will allow us to directly reach more patients than before in an integrated health system. If you look at the number that they serve and how active they are, it will nearly double our medical oncology, but it is limited to that. They won't double surgery, they won't double radiation. Those we have to collaborate with others more organically.
And you will end up getting more. Isn't there also a health system deal as well that you have in the works is that something that is that happening?
So the way things are working in Iowa is the University of Iowa Health System. The goal is to provide advanced and complex care, which cancer care is becoming part of, but we're trying to collaborate with the other health systems. We're not trying, we haven't bought a hospital in Des Moines.
Mhm.
We would like to collaborate with the existing health systems, but help with the most complex care and cancer, especially in the medical field where there are over 300 FDA approved drugs and many more coming, is the preeminent area in that cancer care delivery that fits within complex care.
Mhm. It's actually that merging of community oncology and academic oncology is probably the biggest and most important story unfolding before our eyes right now, is wouldn't you say?
It's an incredible story, and it's different than what's happening elsewhere, where oncology practices are bought out by private equity investors, and the goals are financial. Mission ex chose to join us rather than going on the market to sell to private equity because our mission and our goals to serve patients in their communities are aligned. So we have a golden opportunity in Iowa that um, I think few others have that tight alignment of the health system and the cancer center catchment.
Hmm. Oh, fascinating. I guess also the culture of community oncology versus academic oncology must have changed because it's a generational change has occurred.
Yeah, as I'm talking with my new colleagues at Mission, I'm learning that especially the folks who have joined in the past 10 years really understand the value of bringing clinical research into that practice and have been very active in doing that. And so they are the ones who say, how are my patients going to get access to CAR T cells when they need that? How are they? And this integration is going to provide that high access to those highly specialized therapies and clinical trials. But our goal is to have the same trials available in Des Moines as in Iowa City, where the cancer center is headquartered.
Hmm. 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 Well, it's also, I guess it's generational for them as must be that because they're trained where you trained. You probably trained a bunch of them. Um,
I can't say that I have, but I've had collaborations with them, and I've trained a few oncologists who are in the Iowa. I spent 16 years at University of Wisconsin, and unfortunately, in my opinion, a lot of our training programs are too small because if you look at the need for medical oncologists, you you it's much greater than the number we're training per year. So I was delighted to know that, the size of the medical oncology training program in Iowa is 6 per year, which was more than we were training at University of Wisconsin. Of course, there were other training programs in Wisconsin which made up some of the gap.
Fascinating. What about speaking of generational shifts? You were trained by kids my age. So you're speaking for a generational shift. What is the difference between oncologists and cancer center directors? Forget oncologists, cancer center directors your age versus cancer center directors my age? Is there a way of thinking that's different? Is there a breadth of knowledge, vision? What changes?
Boy, I'm not sure I can speak for everyone my age or generalize for everyone your age. But and this may not reflect your age, but I'm in the delightful position of being mentored at the University of Iowa by George Weiner, our original director.
Right.
And so we have many conversations, and there are things that I learned from him about opportunities, the history, and the focus of cancer centers over the years. I think my preeminent focus is, embracing the complexity of cancer care that we've developed over the years. Back in the 90s, the goal was, hey, let's give everyone high dose multi chemotherapy and we'll cure all cancer.
Hmm.
And then in the early 2000s, it was, hey, Judah Folkman has made this amazing discovery, which he did, and anti-angiogenesis is going to really push the envelope. But what I've seen and what oncologists my age have seen and a bit take for granted, I think, is in the past 10 years, immunotherapy and targeted therapies and cellular therapies have begun really to revolutionize care. I know personally 3 patients I've cared for in the past 10 years who seem to have been cured of metastatic triple negative cancer, the best we can tell, from immunotherapy. I know patients who seem to have been cured from metastatic HER2 positive breast cancer. And the therapeutic advances And the, success rate of drugs coming into the clinic today seem greater than ever before. At the same time, we're getting into this complexity where I think it's becoming harder and harder for a general medical oncologist to work independently and really deliver the top end care for every type of cancer, just because of this complexity. Um, so I think there's, different ideas about healthcare delivery as cancer complexity, but there's a lot more hope and expectation of success in clinical research. I guess we always had that, but we're realizing material improvements as we see activity of drugs in phase 1 trials.
Yeah. Well, I guess in breast cancer, that's where you see it too, right? You're a breast cancer specialist. The change must have been extraordinary in just your career.
Absolutely. Yeah, we didn't have CDK4/6 inhibitors. We didn't have immunotherapy. Antibody drug conjugates are all new since I began my career. And now we're seeing bispecific antibodies and other new therapies coming into the clinic that are incredibly exciting.
Sitting from where I sit, I can't really understand how I I can't understand just how can one be as a could be a generalist and deal with something like this. It must be very difficult for them, as you said.
I think, our general oncologists who are out in the community do an excellent job. And the way they do that is they have very deep familiarity with the common cancers and then get back up when they need it for the rare cancers. One of the things George told me that was unique to Iowa is we see the uncommon cancers disproportionately to the common cancers. And I said, gee, that's interesting. So we have a very robust sarcoma program, very robust AYA program, pediatrics, neuroendocrine, and our breast cancer program traditionally has been small, but that is now growing too. So I think people have done what they can to work within that framework, but it's getting harder and harder as the common cancers, breast, colon, lung, are now subtyped in many ways by genetics and biomarkers, and the treatment plans are getting more complicated. And so this is the time to really collaborate and make sure we help everyone in the state get the best possible care.
Mhm. Having George Weiner as a mentor must be terrific because he's kind of the mentor to the whole field. His yeah.
Right. I was just at AACI and I got a flyer about a consulting company that he's starting to help other cancer centers. And I already got a free in, it looks like.
Wow. Wow. Well, I had no idea. Well, that's fascinating. I'm sure a lot of people want to know about George's consulting company. But he's sticking around, right? He's not
He's
leaving.
sticking around, absolutely.
Okay.
His lab is right across the hall from mine, so I will see him often.
What worries you the most now that you are a cancer center director? What keeps you up at nights?
What keeps me up at night is in a rural care delivery. What if a patient is not getting the best possible cancer care? And um, I know what's happening in genetics and immunotherapy. And so, for example, if you're a rectal cancer with high microsatellite instability, why immunotherapy would be your first treatment before surgery. And if you happen to be in a hospital with only general surgeons and get referred there first, you may end up down the wrong pathway. So I really want to make sure we're delivering the best possible care. One thing that gives me a lot of hope is Mary Charlton and Ingrid Lizarraga have formed a program called ICAN, I-CAN. They are working with hospitals around the state, critical access hospitals, other small health systems, and are making sure they are getting accredited and forming relationships to help us collaborate with them, even if they're not in our health system, to make sure patients get the best possible care from the start. It really happens. There's some cancers where you really have to have a lot of detailed information right at the start, and those are the ones that keep me up at night.
Fascinating. How would you, what's the answer is what to that? Is it guidelines? Is it pathways? Is it forging relationships with the docs who would then use the pathways or the guidelines? Well, how do you do this? Do you get people to read NCCN guidelines? What do you how do you do it?
Um, I think there needs to be good collaboration and communication foremost, so that people are aware when they should when they should, call for help, who should see a genetic counselor on day one. I think in the future that'll be everyone because the germline genetics affects your surgery in some cases. And that's how you find microsatellite instability. And so I don't know. I think communication and collaboration is the best. And in a world where we have telehealth now, I think we could do much more as a comprehensive cancer center that has the goal and mission to serve the state than we currently do. But that kind of backup and expertise we want to provide to every physician, not to take their patients, but to help them make sure their patients get the best care. And when needed, have access to a specialist in our health system.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Guidelines are good, but getting everyone to read them every time is going to always be a challenge, especially when they're 250 pages each.
Right.
Um, and it's just I understand there's a pressure of taking care of all of your patients. And imagine being a busy surgeon in Spencer, Iowa, where your next two patients are waiting, and you have to decide whether you're going to take your patient to surgery or not, or you're going to stop the presses and send them to a genetic counselor and get a lot of help. Um, so I think there's education and collaboration are the preeminent keys there.
So that means you popping in to see that surgeon. How does that work? Or
It might be to make sure they know who they can contact and get immediate feedback. Some of the critical access hospitals in the state are on our instance of Epic through a program. And so an inbox or a secure chat could be sent. So one of the things we're doing is setting up the directory of expert groups where people can ask. Doctors do this all the time informally. Send a secure text or a secure chat to their colleagues in a group to get feedback. If you're working alone in part of the state and you're seeing something unusual, you don't even know how to get that feedback. But if you have a secure chat or an inbox through Epic, and you have a directory of who knows what, you could go right and get that feedback pretty quickly.
Mhm. And that works actually, right? Or does it just go into the stratosphere? That would be my fear, but I'm a Luddite, so
Yeah, it worked. I mean, it works among the group of us. Like, the breast cancer group often contacts each other to get feedback on patients we're seeing and learning from each other because someone may know a paper or a trial that we didn't think of in the context of this case and bring that to everyone's attention. And so that's a learning thing, but it's also helping to care for that patient. I think this is pretty routine. My colleagues at Mission do this all the time where they contact their colleagues at Mission to get feedback on cases. It could be overwhelming if we try to do this statewide, but if we have very specific areas of expertise that people can tap into, I don't think the volume would be overwhelming.
hmm. Well, what I was trying to suggest is that texting might work better.
Yeah,
Because
I think the problem with texting is, and some people do that, it doesn't have the security. So that's why I didn't talk about texting.
right, right. But just to get you, hey, look over there in your Epic box. That
Yeah. And people can text about things that aren't PHI, like what do you think of using this drug first line versus that drug? You don't have to have PHI in that text. So that happens too.
Yeah, fascinating. But you're a data science guy as well, or at least you're not scared of it.
I dabble in that. Yeah, I've always liked computers. I grew up with computers. I guess maybe that is a generational difference. And I got to play with them as a kid, and I dabbled with being a computer scientist at one point. So now I'm a medical oncologist who's dangerous in thinking he knows something about computers, but doesn't really have the training. But it got me thinking deeply about how we identify patients for clinical trials. And the traditional approach is you tell every oncologist what trials you have for their disease, and they are supposed to keep them in mind and see patients and remember in a very busy clinic. And so the challenge with that is some of us can remember more. Some of us spend more time looking at eligibility and enrolling. And some of us see patients with all different diseases. So how could we know that large portfolio of trials? So I think the solution, and this is something we were talking about at ACI, is the ability for us to use informatics, push a button, match every patient in our health system to every trial, like a potential match, and then log that into the medical record and update that weekly. And then as a physician, when you see your patient in clinic and you're making a treatment decision, before you present your recommendation to your patient, you look into that list of trials that have matched that patient. And then you can investigate, talk to the coordinator whose phone number is in there, and get enough information to ask the patient if they wish to participate as part of the treatment decision.
Mhm.
So that would be the most efficient system. And I would argue it's the most equitable system because if it totally depends on the memory of your oncologist, then what trials you have access to depends on the chance of which oncologist you got assigned to, who had availability in clinic that day. And that is not an equitable way to get access to clinical trials. So we are trying to get as close as we can to this systematic approach at the University of Iowa. And we're starting stepwise. We're looking at the software we have. We're looking at some of the processes we have. We are next month going to have the ability to log these, what we call pre-consent matches into the medical record. And we are working on training the physicians and helping them to easily identify those and work them into their clinical workflows without slowing down their work in a busy clinic.
I mean,
So,
tools enable this. That was our conversation at the ACI. We might as well put it on record. But do tools currently enable you to match?
so the challenge is that much of the data in medical records is not discrete, it's text. And so, with most medical oncology trials for advanced cancer, say solid tumors, you want to know about four things. You want to know what type of cancer it is. You want to know whether it's metastatic or early stage. You want to know whether they have measurable disease. And you want to know what line of therapy. So that all sounds, I think if you could match on those four things, you would be 80% of the way there on most trials. But it turns out that that information is not discrete in the medical record. And so there are various systems that do text-based matching. But that becomes a challenge too, because metastatic means multiple things. As an oncologist, I think of it as whether the cancer has distant metastases or not. But as a pathologist, they will describe regional lymph node involvement as regional lymph node metastases. And so that text, that word will appear. So it has to be more creative to parse that out in a electronic or AI system. I think some of the systems are getting there. The other way to go about it is to ask each physician to enter this data discreetly. But we are like herding cats. We're in a busy clinics, and you're asking us to do one more thing to enter all this additional information into forms. That can be a challenge too. So I think the best approach is to stepwise improve the matching process. It'll be partly manual now. There are ways to do system searches that we can continue to optimize. And then as the matching and AI software gets better, I do see a day where we will be able to match all our 200 plus trials to all our patients on a regular basis with over 90% fidelity. But it certainly is not possible to do that today, in my experience.
So that it's interesting because I've been covering data science really from the beginning of it sort of showing up in cancer. And that question, that issue of what does metastatic mean or what does really almost any medical term mean has been there and it's still there.
It's still there. Yeah, it's still there. And we put things all we say things informally and understand each other in the context all the time. But when you're training computers to search on words, it's more complex.
Fascinating. Really is something that's worth looking into much deeper. And I'm sure, well, there are a lot of people who are looking into it, but we were discussing a project that we should probably do. But yeah, I guess is there anything I forgot to ask? Is there
Well, there's a big one about cancer, about what we're doing as a cancer center more than treating cancer patients and doing research. Um, right now, Iowa is number two in adjusted cancer rates after Kentucky, and our rates are going up. And so, unlike Kentucky, our rates are going up. And so, the university and the state has made it a priority to invest in cancer in all parts. And this goes to opportunities to prevent and early screening statewide. I'm very lucky to have leaders in the College of Public Health who serve in the Cancer Center, Mary Charlton and Natasha Askelson. A good collaboration with the Iowa Cancer Consortium and other ways of reaching out to populations across the state to communicate and to work on impacting these cancer rates. And one thing I'm very impressed with, I just got here, so I can't take any responsibility, but Mary and Natasha are going out to each of the 99 counties of the state and meeting with health and other leaders in each county to go over that county's cancer rates, the risk factors, and the opportunities they have to reduce the burden of cancer. So that's just one example of the many community outreach and engagement programs that are going on in Iowa. It's very impressive.
well, Kim
Um,
was just there. Uh,
yeah, she was just there at our Iowa Cancer Consortium Cancer Summit in Ankeny, and gave a wonderful talk. And we discussed this. Dr. Charlton discussed that we're in the number two cancer rate in the country and what we can do to address that. So it was a well-received visit. Dr. Rathmel also spent a great deal of time visiting communities and critical access hospitals around the state, and attended a rural breakfast where uh, where physicians and others in care delivery for cancer around the state met, and we had some wonderful discussions about the challenges of rural care delivery. Dr. Rathmel asked us to meet the challenge of bringing clinical research into these community sites. So I asked her, how far am I supposed to do that? Am I supposed to tell them that there's a clinical trial available? or am I supposed to open that trial in Spencer, Iowa? And she gave her marching orders. We're supposed to open that trial in Spencer, Iowa, the right trial, not every trial. So we're looking into opportunities to do that.
Well, does that mandate from the state or from NCI come with money?
Um, no, it comes with some maybe some know-how and some incentive, but I've learned over the years at academics that every NCI and NIH initiative is underfunded, and we have to do more to raise funding in cancer research to support that. I'm facing that right now because one of the needs of the university is more cancer research space, lab space. And I brought this to the attention of uh, Dean Jameson, who was ultimately the one who hired me. But it also, President Wilson, the president of the university, is very supportive. And we recently presented to the Board of Regents that we are planning a new cancer research building. And that will be an intercollegiate building. Because one of the strengths of the university and the priorities of the University of Cancer is that we have multiple colleges who are doing cancer research. I already mentioned the College of Public Health and the College of Medicine, but the College of Pharmacy is now led by Dean Jill Kolazar, who is a cancer center leader who trained me in Wisconsin and then was a leader in Kentucky. And so she just had her investiture yesterday, and I participated in speaking with her community board on the work we're going to do together in cancer drug development. We have a dental school, we have a nursing school, we have an engineering school, and so multiple colleges have an interest in this. And so the idea of building an intercollegiate building is we are going to be able to foster interdisciplinary science by having people from different disciplines cheek by jowl in labs doing cancer research. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to expand our cancer research footprint. But the reason I got to this, Paul, is you asked about NIH funding, and we fully understand that we are going to have to not only figure out how to fund that building, but how to recruit and fund faculty who go into that building. And we're looking at multiple sources of resources. But this number two in cancer has really galvanized the state and the university to support the expansion, as we need to be the center of solving this problem.
Mhm, mhm. And this is an incidence problem or mortality or
Fortunately, the mortality is not as high, so we might be doing okay in healthcare delivery. It's still higher than I would like, but it's an incidence problem. And it's not solely related to screening. And the other thing people have asked is it related to all the agricultural activity in the state? That's been a common question we've gotten. And, we had Laura Bean Freeman at our cancer summit. She's I would say, a agricultural epidemiologist. And she presented a really interesting 20-year follow-up of farmers who sprayed pesticides in Iowa and North Carolina. And what she found was their cancer rates were lower than the rest of the population. But it's because the incidence of tobacco use was way lower in this population. So we don't have clarity on whether, these agricultural chemicals may have a impact on cancer rates, but it looked from her presentation that any possible cancer risk is dwarfed by the cancer risk avoided by not using tobacco.
so incidence is particularly high in lung, right? Or
The four cancers are lung, melanoma, prostate, and breast. So lung, I think, is largely related to tobacco use, as you might imagine. Melanoma, I think, is sun exposure and UV tanning beds, which there aren't many regulations in Iowa. and the I think radon plays a role in lung. With prostate and breast, we have less clarity on that, but alcohol and obesity seem to be factors. And interestingly, the incidence is a little bit higher in the urban areas than in the agricultural areas. So again, we don't think it's solely related to agricultural activities, but we are still investigating whether those could play a small role.
I just thought of something else I forgot to ask, which was the MCDs, which is what we would have been talking about a year ago, for example, as a big thing in oncology, the next tsunami coming in to engulf the cancer centers. But are you losing any sleep about it over it right now?
I'm not losing much sleep over MCDs. I think it's been interesting to watch the field. It's not surprising that we get all excited about a new technology. Um, I haven't ruled it out either because it really all hinges on sensitivity and specificity. And when you're going into population-based screening, that's the hardest place. We don't do low-dose CT scans on everyone to screen for lung cancer. We pick the highest risk folks. So there still may be avenues for the existing assays, but I think there's also hope for improving those assays. And related to the MCEDs is the MRD assays, the minimal residual disease, which I think we are finding have more utility. It's long been used like BCR-ABL testing for CML to look for molecular recurrence. That's old. What has delayed the solid tumors is every cancer has a different set of mutations. So your DNA-based MRD tests have to be informed by the whole genome sequencing of the tumors, which has become possible. One is on the market, the Signatera, which has clinical utility, particularly in colorectal. It's used in breast, but some of us would argue its utility is limited by not knowing how to use like not having an adequate therapeutic to respond to early recurrence, and the sensitivity of the assay. But there's a next generation of MRDs that are more sensitive. So I'm looking forward to building clinical trials for molecular recurrence of breast and other cancer, where we take that molecular recurrence before it's overt metastatic and use our best therapeutics available to intervene and hopefully cure those cancers.
Oh, so you're more interested in this in the in the recurrence setting than in the screening setting.
Yeah, MRD, I think is going to have, I'm very excited how it's placed in the recurrence setting. Because you can drive down sensitivity if you know specifically what mutations are in that person's cancer.
So MRD, not MCD, is what you're thinking.
Yeah, I think I'm more bullish on MRD. But the first generation of tests, a lot of people are kind of, well, the first generation of tests isn't good enough. But there are more sensitive MRD tests out there that are being developed now.
Well, so now for real, is there anything I forgot to ask?
Um, yeah. Oh, yeah. So you didn't ask how long the is probably why you didn't ask about the history of the University of Iowa Holden Comprehensive Cancer Center. But right outside of my office is a letter that George received on December 1st, 2000, with the NCI naming us an NCI designated comprehensive cancer center. And George shares with me we're the last center to go from no designation directly to comprehensive designation. And so we are planning a big party for the 25th anniversary, December 1 of next year. So are you interested in coming?
Yeah, I would love to.
It'll be December 1, 2025 is the big party.
I'll put it on the calendar right now.